All right, welcome back, everybody. This will be lecture 2E, excuse me, prayer at government meetings. And this will involve two cases, and we'll basically learn that the court has been pretty permissive of prayer at government meetings. So the first case in 1983 is Marsh v. Chambers. It is a 6-3 reversal of the lower court ruling. The lower court ruled that the Nebraska legislature could not pay a chaplain to give sort of the induction ceremony prayer, basically. So Chief Justice Berger delivers the majority opinion. So, like I was saying, Nebraska opens each legislative session. They're the one state in America that has a unicameral legislature, so just one house. They don't have a House of Representatives and a Senate like the other 49 states and the federal government. They have just a house. So each session, I think they're on biannual sessions every 2 years. They would pay a chaplain. They had him on the rolls for like $350 a month in the 80s. They would pay a chaplain to give the legislative session, prayer. And one of the fellow Nebraska legislature members filed suit claiming Establishment Clause problems. And the lower court claimed that, Nebraska can't do this, but the Supreme Court disagrees. And they say there's basically three reasons why. First, he was not chosen for a quote unquote impermissible motive. They didn't really go into what that meant. So, I find it, if you look back at the Lemon test, right, the first rule was it had to have a secular purpose, right? And so I have a hard time understanding what this impermissible motive means, because if you look at the Lemon test, it sort of suggests that, if it doesn't have a secular purpose, which a chaplain shouldn't, then it shouldn't pass muster. But the court disagrees. It's the early 80s. Reagan has put in some Supreme Court members, so the court is changing to a more conservative viewpoint. So number one, impermissible motive. Number two, the practice of chaplaincy in the courts and in the legislatures and even in the federal government legislature is long historical, right? 200 years of history. From the very first legislative sessions, there were always prayers. And the payments from the state coffers are also rooted in U.S. history. Again, in almost all of the states and in the federal government, there's always been sort of a legislative chaplain who's been on the payroll. And so, because of these reasons, the court says it's fine, Nebraska can do this. All right, the second case is a 2014 case called the Town of Greece versus Galloway. And it is a 5-4 reversal of the lower court ruling, and Justice Kennedy delivers the majority opinion. And Justice Kennedy says, basically the context here is that Greece, New York, a little town in New York of about 100,000, opens every town meeting with a prayer. And for about 20 years, the prayer has always been Christian. And the court says basically they're going to bow to the Marsh precedent, the case we just talked about before, and explains that, the town hall history is very long. This is the tradition of having someone come and give a prayer. And that Marsh didn't set any sort of precedent or establish a need for quote unquote neutrality of content. So just because it's Christian only doesn't mean it's problematic. And they claim, in the majority opinion at least, that the town was didn't take a Christian biased perspective, that they also allowed non-believers and believers from other faiths to lead the sort of legislative prayer. And then Justice Kagan dissents pretty hard. Elena Kagan, who I think was an Obama appointee, and she dissents pretty hard, and she says there's two main reasons that this case is far different from the Marsh case from 1980s. And the first is that in the Nebraska legislature, everyone was a legislative member, right? They were a member of government. And whereas in the town of Greece, New York, the members are generally the public, right? And so there's a big differentiation to make between giving sort of a Christian prayer at a legislative assembly versus giving a Christian prayer in a public meeting. And then the second point that she makes is that the town it wasn't actually unbiased in who it chose. For those 20 years, the only people that they invited were either Catholic priests or Christian ministers, and that they did not invite anyone else to come and give the invocation until they were sued. And at that point, they made an effort to reach out to others. So, Kagan makes some interesting points, but that's the way it's settled for now. So I'll see you for the next one, part 2F. Have a great day.